Football's heartbreaking tales, stories that shook the world. Imagine the thrill of victory turning to unimaginable loss in an instant. What if the game you love claims lives, shatters dreams, or ignites global outrage? Today, we dive into the most gut-wrenching moments in football history that left fans worldwide in tears, shock, and disbelief. Hold on tight. These stories will grip your heart from start to finish. Diogo Jota, triumph cut short by tragedy. Picture this, a star at the top of his game, lifting trophies, marrying his soulmate only for fate to strike cruelly. Football stood still when one of the most loved players in the Premier League tragically lost his life at just 28 years old. Jota was at the peak of his powers. He had just lifted the Premier League trophy with Liverpool and the Nations League trophy with Portugal. And if life couldn't be any better on the pitch, he had finally married his high school sweetheart, Ruth Cardoso, who was also the mother to his 3 children, Dennis, Dante, and Laura. Meaning for a rare moment in life, everything felt perfect, and he fought his whole life to get to this position. Jota started his career in Portugal before getting his first big move to Atletico Madrid. They loaned him to Porto, then English side Wolverhampton Wanderers, where Jota would make a name for himself as his goals would fire Wolves back into the Premier League and then into Europe. His consistency, hard work, and talent finally caught the attention of Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool as he brought him into the club where he instantly made an impact. In the 2021-22 season, he scored 21 goals as Liverpool won the FA Cup and League Cup whilst finishing second in the Premier League and reaching the Champions League final. Now, Jota wasn't just loved on the pitch, because he was also a strong part of the gaming community, actually one of the best FIFA players in the world, truly making him a fan favorite in the footballing world. Come 2025, and his football career reached its peak as he finally won the Premier League with Liverpool, playing a strong part in the team that year. But his commitment was deeper than just goals and assists, because that season he was playing with a serious injury and had kept putting off surgery, playing through the pain so that he could help Liverpool finally win the title. Nobody knew at the time, but Diogo had been playing with a collapsed lung. So that summer, after marrying his childhood sweetheart in a ceremony with friends and family in Portugal, he had a much-needed operation to fix his lung. The operation was a success, but it meant he was not allowed to fly. So he was told he had to take the ferry back to Liverpool with his brother Andre Silva. His brother was also a pro football player, and the two of them were very close, so they decided to drive back to the ferry together. And this is where the heartbreak occurs. They decided to drive at night as it was cooler, but shortly before a planned overnight stop, Jota's Lamborghini blew out its tire while overtaking at high speed and crashed, killing both Jota and Andre on impact. This came just 1 week after his wedding day, where his final post to the world was a video surrounded by friends, family, and his 3 children, captioned, "A day we will never forget." After his death, the entire footballing world stood still. Liverpool retired Jota's shirt number 20, and players and fans around the world paid tribute to Jota, with many of his former teammates showing their respect for Jota by pretending to play video games whenever they scored. Jota was buried alongside his brother in a church in his hometown, so that in death as in life, he will never walk alone. A player passing at the peak of their powers is truly awful, but what about an entire team passing away in one of the saddest stories in football history? The Busby Babes, a devastating crash that redefined resilience. Can you fathom a team of young prodigies poised to conquer Europe wiped out in seconds? For this, we have to roll the clock back a few years to the late 1950s, when Manchester United had arguably the most talented side in all of Europe. I mean, this wasn't a team of high-profile, big-money signings, but instead a group of exciting young players who had just won the league back-to-back and were expected to dominate European football for the next decade. Led by manager Sir Matt Busby, with talents like Bobby Charlton and Duncan Edwards in the side, this team were known as the Busby Babes, and were on track to lift their first ever European Cup as they had just drawn 3-3 away to Red Star Belgrade to secure their spot in the semifinal. But as this match ended, nobody could have predicted quite what a tragedy was about to unfold. They flew back from Belgrade and had to stop the plane in Munich to refuel. but the plane's engines had some issues to the point that 2 attempts to take off were aborted. And by that time, it had started to snow, covering the runway with slush. It looked like the players would spend the night in Munich, and Duncan Edwards even sent a telegram to his landlady saying all flights were canceled. But the pilots made the fateful decision to try to take off one more time so that the team could stay on schedule with league matches. But as the plane accelerated down the runway, it once again was unable to reach fast enough speeds to take off. But this time the plane was going too fast to abort the takeoff, skidding off the runway and crashing into a house. In an instant, 20 passengers had lost their lives, 7 of which were Manchester United football players. Duncan Edwards survived the crash, but unfortunately died 15 days later in the hospital, and 2 further Manchester United players were left so badly injured that they could never play football again. Bobby Charlton was one of the survivors of this crash who experienced what could only be described as a miracle as he swapped seats in between takeoff attempts, quite literally being the difference between life and death. After a tragedy like this, surely the players, the manager, and the club as a whole should have faded into nothingness. But these men were not quite ready to give up. Over the course of the next decade, Manchester United rebuilt and somehow returned to European football as Bobby Charlton lifted the European Cup in the greatest comeback story in sports history. He also lifted the World Cup and even the Ballon d'Or as both Bobby Charlton and Manchester United turned the worst night of their club's history into fuel to honor the ones who did not make it out alive. Now, not every heartbreaking story has to be about death.
Luis Suarez, the hand that crushed an entire continent's dreams. What if one man's blatant cheat robbed an entire continent of its greatest moment? Because in 2010, the hearts of an entire continent were well and truly broken as one man cheated to literally destroy the hopes and dreams of every boy in all of Africa. The story takes place at the 2010 World Cup, hosted by South Africa. And at that time, no African nation had ever made it to the semi-finals of the tournament. Come the quarterfinals, only one African nation remained, with that being Ghana. So the entire continent was behind them as they were drawn against Uruguay, whose main man was none other than Luis Suarez. And this version of Suarez was ruthless to say the least, with disciplinary issues coming left and right. But he was about to experience the most hate he would ever receive in his entire career. Ghana started the game on the front foot and took the lead with an absolute screamer by Sulley Muntari, but Uruguay soon equalized through Diego Forlan. The game went to extra time, and in the 120th minute, Ghana thought they had won the game as Dominic Idea headed the ball toward the net. But Luis Suarez, standing on the goal line, had other ideas and just stretched his arm and used his hand to stop the ball from going in. He wasn't even trying to hide his cheating in what was a clear-cut act of bad sportsmanship. And of course, Suarez got a red card. Ghana were handed a penalty, and the entire African nation sat and watched as the player ran up and hit the ball hard, beating the keeper. But instead of rattling the net, it pinged off the bar. At that moment, Suarez started celebrating, knowing that his cheating had probably won Uruguay the game. And he was right, as they went on to win the penalty shootout, eliminating Ghana. Suarez gloated and mocked Ghana in the media, saying he made the save of the tournament and even comparing himself to Diego Maradona by saying, "The hand of God belongs to me now." Just like that, African hearts were shattered and Suarez became the devil to an entire continent. Now, big tournaments like the World Cup are full of moments when everyone holds their breath. But this next story had the entire stadium in a state of shock as this football player almost died on the pitch. This takes place in 2021, where Denmark are playing their opening game in the Euros in front of a home crowd in Copenhagen. A huge occasion for the small nation to be playing a major tournament game on home soil, and they were expected to win against Finland, so the crowd went to the match full of optimism. But in the 42nd minute, everything changed. Denmark's star player Christian Eriksen was about to receive a throw-in when he just collapsed on the pitch. The world looked on in horror as time seemed to stand still. Denmark captain Simon Kjær acted quickly and put Eriksen in the recovery position before paramedics with defibrillators ran onto the pitch to treat him. He was rushed to hospital, and Danish fans held their breath until news reached them an hour later that he had stabilized. It was later confirmed that he had a heart attack and had to be fitted with an ICD defibrillator device, but thankfully he had survived. Now, Eriksen was an Inter Milan player at the time, but his future as a football player looked in serious doubt, especially because Serie A rules meant he couldn't play in Italy with a defibrillator. So Inter Milan ripped up his contract as it looked like his career was over. But in a twist of fate, it turned out Eriksen could still play in England, and despite the world of football doubting his health status, he joined Premier League side Brentford before making a sideways move to Manchester United. And almost a year after the heart attack, Eriksen returned to the national team to a hero's welcome, even scoring within 2 minutes of his return, proving a happy ending to a heartbreaking story. But the thing is, Eriksen was probably closer to dying on that pitch than people like to admit, because he wasn't the first player to experience something like this. These stories, they remind us of something we often forget when the lights are bright and the crowds are roaring. Football is more than a game. It's joy, it's pain, it's family, it's dreams, it's life itself. Diego celebrating his wedding 1 week, gone the next. The Busby babes boarding a plane full of hope, never coming home. These moments broke us. They made us cry in stadiums, in living rooms, in the middle of the night years later. But somehow, in the tears, they also brought us closer. Strangers hugged, rivals mourned together. Football kept playing, kept healing, kept reminding us how fragile and how beautiful this mad, chaotic sport really is. So the next time you watch a goal celebration, a last-minute winner, or even just a player tying his laces before kickoff, pause for a second. Feel it deeper, because every second on that pitch is a gift. Every roar from the stands is borrowed time, and every story we just told proves one heartbreaking truth. In football, just like in life, you never know which moment will be the last. Cherish it, love it fiercely, because some stories end in glory and some end in silence that echoes forever. Thank you for staying with me through the tears. This is football. This is us. Never forget them. You'll never walk alone.